I want to take this opportunity to introduce our last speaker of the day. Martin Schreiber was a former governor of Wisconsin, and he was the caregiver of his wife, Elaine. And the title of his book, My Two Elaines, refers to the fact that Martin's wife had Alzheimer's. And so his book is very touching. It's advertised on our website. And if you'd like to purchase the book, you can go to our website and find his book and find out how to purchase it from him. Okay, Marty, thank you very much for being here.
Bob, it's great to be here. And to all the viewers, this is maybe a poor substitute for Saturday afternoon football, but for everyone who's rooting for their team, the best if the team is playing. But what an honor for me to be among your panelists. I've caught a number of the discussions today, and so your work is certainly paying off huge dividends and making a difference in people's lives. And for those of us that go through the experience of caregiving, just a brief background. My wife and I have been married almost 60 years. She's been diagnosed early onset some 17 years ago. And for the last 5 years, as of the moment, she is in assisted living memory care. And what is a striking impact to me is the fact that 17 years ago, when she was first diagnosed, there was no cure. Alzheimer's could not be delayed, nor could it be prevented. Now we advance 17 years. Alzheimer's cannot be cured, it cannot be delayed, and it cannot be prevented. But what is happening is the number of people impacted and affected by this disease is growing significantly. And so what is so important there then is while the scientists are trying to figure out what is causing this disease and how to prevent it, how to delay it, what we have to understand, what I believe is very important, that if there's one thing worse than Alzheimer's, it's ignorance of the disease. And when I say ignorance of the disease, I mean by me, the caregiver, ignorance of the disease by the medical profession, ignorance of the disease by churches and parishes and temples, ignorance of the disease by bankers, ignorance of the disease by attorneys who do not understand the impact of this disease on the person who is ill and also on the caregiver. And so within that framework, then, I wanted to do what I could in sharing some experiences in this book that will help caregivers learn, cope, and survive. Now, my first experience with dementia, that was back in 1978 when I was running for governor I gave a talk in northern Wisconsin in the city of Eau Claire. It's a little bit south and a little bit east of Minneapolis, Minnesota. But I gave this campaign talk, and after the campaign talk was over, this elderly gentleman came up to me and he pounded me on the shoulder. He said, "Governor," he said, "I want you to know that that was the world's most god-awful speech I've ever heard." Well, his wife heard that. And she came rushing over. She said, "Governor," she says, "please excuse my husband. He's old and he's senile. And all he does is just repeat whatever he hears everybody else say." And so that, in essence, was the first experience with this disease. And one of the things which was talked about today, and that is this terrible stress, the emotions, the depression, the anxiety. A couple of very important things to understand. Alzheimer's is not a chicken casserole disease. Hypothetically speaking, if I have a heart attack and go to the hospital, I fall and I break a leg or my hip, and I'm laid up, people will bring me chicken casserole. But with Alzheimer's, friends and neighbors do not know how to handle this disease. They're ignorant of it, and they don't quite know what they should be doing. And so they, in turn, then stay away, and they don't know what to say, and they're uncomfortable. And what happens is, because I'm ignorant of the disease as a caregiver, I do not go out of my way to try and help them understand. And so that makes one of the challenges, but there's another challenge. And I have to make sure that I say this right so nobody misunderstands. If a loved one dies of a heart attack, there's finality, there's closure. With Alzheimer's, your loved one dies a little bit every day, and there is no closure. Also, because this disease is progressive, what happens is we do our very best to help our loved one be as good as possible. And no matter how hard we work, no matter what we do, what happens is the disease gets worse. So what am I doing wrong? So more coal on the fire. So I work harder. And maybe I stop going to the gym, and maybe I stop associating with friends, and maybe I even pull back from work. And so what happens is my circle is becoming very, very small. And my circle is becoming very small because I'm trying to take care of my loved one, but it's not working, and maybe I'm a failure. Let me tell you what I think happens in the life of a person with Alzheimer's. If we can imagine a funnel and you take a look up, and of course, because the funnel expands when you hold a small part by your eye, you look up and you can see the blueness of the sky and the hope of tomorrow. But what happens is, as this disease progresses, that funnel becomes inverted. And now the large part is by your eye, and you look up, and all you see is a little bit. That then becomes the world. That then becomes the life of the person who is ill. And what happens is, we don't understand that. If Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. So what was going on in my life, I tried to keep Elaine in my world. And the more I tried to have her understand it didn't happen on a Wednesday, but it happened on a Thursday, the more I had her understand that it wasn't in 1972 that something happened, but 1982, the more miserable I made her life, and the more frustrating my life became. And so what I began to understand is I had to let go of this person who once was, so I can now embrace the person who now is. And let me share, there was a hippopotamus and a butterfly, and they fell in love with one another, and they're about to be married. And so what is happening is the hippopotamus is beginning to think, how do I consummate this marriage with a butterfly? And so he seeks out the wise owl. He says, wise owl, he says, I'm in love with this butterfly. We're gonna get married. How do I consummate the marriage? Well, says the wise owl, you turn yourself into a butterfly. Why? Hippopotamus says, that's a pretty good idea. So he thinks about it. And as he's walking away, he says, wait a minute. How do I turn myself into a butterfly? So he goes back, he says, wise owl. He says, how do I turn myself into a butterfly? And the wise owl says, get lost, Buster. I'm just determined policy. Well, this is policy. And what I'm telling you, it's very, very difficult. It is so very, very difficult to let go of this person who once was, so we can now embrace who now is. One of the things that caregivers have to understand is that we get to the point where we have to realize we are no longer a spouse. Our loving marriage relationship, because of our loved one's situation, turns us from spouse into caregiver. And it's almost like the first step in understanding Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is to admit that you are an alcoholic. And I think we have to get to the point where we as caregivers admit that we are caregivers. Because as long as I am Elaine Schreiber's husband, as long as I am her helpmate, as long as I am that, I can do it by myself, because no one is going to help me do anything with her because I am her husband. I have to understand that my wife, Elaine, is a different person, and she needs help above and beyond that of which a husband can give her. Now, I've given any number of talks around the countryside, cut short by COVID. And one of the things that comes up most, particularly from husbands, that is the agonizing decision of placement of a loved one in assisted living. And that tore me apart. And what I want to share with people is that I went through counseling through the Alzheimer's Association. And I'm meeting with my counselor, and I say, I just cannot see putting, and the key word here, putting Elaine into assisted living nursing home. She looked at me and she says, Marty, she says, you're not putting Elaine anyplace. You are giving her an opportunity to be who she is now. Can Marty Schreiber's 24/7 nursing home take care of Elaine? The answer to that was no, impossible. I was not getting a decent night's sleep because I would sleep near the door for fear she would go out at night. I would get this anger and frustration building up because things just weren't going right. And no matter how hard I tried. And so once I began to understand that I was not putting Elaine anyplace, I was giving her an opportunity to be who she is now, I realized there was another factor, and that was my own ego. My battle was with Alzheimer's. And by God, I was not going to let this disease beat me. And so because of that, I made sure that I fought this disease and I kept Elaine home. In other words, Elaine was in essence becoming the person on the sideline. It was me and Alzheimer's battling. Well, I found out that in order for me to be a real man, I had to understand that this disease doesn't fight fairly. This disease doesn't fight in any way, kind of shape or form in a manner that people would consider just. And so I had to say, how can I beat this disease? Well, I can beat this disease by learning more about it. I can beat this disease by helping my wife, Elaine, become and be who she is now. We met when we were freshmen in high school. And so we got married and 13 children, 6 grandchildren. And as I said, she's now in her 5th year of assisted living memory care. And she was the hardest working person on any campaign that I ever ran in. If I would win, she would be the hardest working person. If I would lose, she would never let me feel defeated. And so this was the woman who, along the line, as we dealt with this this Alzheimer's, she well, we were eating lunch over there in assisted living a while back, and she started to cry. I said, Elaine, why are you crying? Well, she said, she looked at me, she said, I'm beginning to love you more than my husband. Well, I didn't ask what's wrong with your turkey husband. I didn't do that. But what that proved to me is that it is not necessary for her to know who I am in order for our hearts to touch. And again, I understand what caregivers go through. I have to make sure that caregivers know that they are true heroes. Caregivers have to understand that they can be doing their very best, but they have to understand they cannot do it alone. And so here is what I owe my wife, Elaine, even though she does not know who I am. This is what every caregiver owes their loved one, and that is to keep themselves as healthy as possible. We owe it to our loved one to have as clear of a mind as possible. We owe it to our loved one to make sure we understand. As I found out that all of the armies marching, all of the Navy sailing, all of the beer that's brewed, all of the liquor that's distilled is not going to stop this disease. And so as caregivers, then we have to understand we can't do it alone. And if we keep ourselves healthy, if we make sure that we get the proper kind of exercise, if we make sure that we share and get help, it's going to make such a significant difference in our own lives as well as the lives of our loved one. Because I think they really want us to give our best as we can. What I wanted to do is to when I wrote my 2 Elaines, I'm about ready to go to press, and so as with my 2 Elaines, we're ready to go to press, and lo and behold, maybe 3 to 4 weeks before we're ready to go to press, I find a series of notes and journals that Elaine had been keeping since the time of her diagnosis. I went through those notes, and what came through loud and clear was the fact that up until that point, I had no idea the kind of courage that it takes to be diagnosed with this disease and continue forward. I just really didn't understand it. And it was really more about me, the caregiver. I'm trying my best. I can't do it. I gotta try harder and so forth. And I would get frustrated with Elaine, but I really never did understand what it's like. And so what I did was with my daughter Kathy and daughter Christine, we went through all of her notes, and what we were able to do is to capture what we hope will give a reader a good understanding of what it's like to be diagnosed with this disease. Let me just read a few of the things Elaine had written. Early on with her diagnosis, she wrote a letter and she entitled it, Dear Loved Ones. And I'm going to read. It wasn't until a few weeks ago that I really had to say, yes, I do have Alzheimer's. I had read of signs that indicate Alzheimer's, like getting overly upset for no reason and having trouble with names and directions. But I still didn't think it was a problem for me. But in hindsight, for too long, I've been getting lost driving, having trouble keeping days straight, and difficulties with names and schedules. I still felt I could handle it. It won't get worse. But this morning, I started reading about the mid-stage of Alzheimer's in hopes of preparing myself better, and realized I am not very far away. That is most scary, but I have to accept it. So she writes about that, but when I talk to caregivers and say they owe it to their loved one to keep themselves healthy as best, she wrote just a very short note. She wrote to me, she said, I would be so lost without you. So please continue to take good care of yourself for me as well as for you. And so we know then that as you are diagnosed with this disease, you know that you are in a process of losing your mind, of losing who you are. And so she wrote here again, and I'm going to point out how she was dependent upon me. She said, and not for self-grandizement, but to drive home the caregivers, they have to understand how important they are in their loved one's life so that they can keep themselves healthy. She writes, I'm so lucky he is a good cook and seems to enjoy making healthy and delicious meals. It's a good thing, as my Alzheimer's isn't getting any better. So cooking and baking with steps that need to be worked on are no longer easy for me. I hate to think I am getting worse, but I must be. And so now I want to read something which really sort of took me aback. And so, as I said, she was as wonderful of a wife, devoted as could ever. And I read what she said about keeping myself healthy. But here she wrote this. She said, I'm not enjoying my role anymore as Marty's wife because of his having concerns about my Alzheimer's. He doesn't let me be me. He doesn't let me go for a walk if I want to, or to the store alone. I used to appreciate him, what I thought was concern, but he holds me captive much too much. I'm going to try to have a second opinion because I really don't think I have any problems. I know how to drive or walk any place. I know that he doesn't believe me, and I hate the control he has placed on me. I don't even think I have Alzheimer's per se. And so as our loved one is going through this, and as this funnel is being inverted so that they're going in and out of different experiences, they're going through some very significant trauma. And I want to drive home that point. So caregivers so clearly understand they've got to be taking care of themselves so they can give their best to their loved one. Because if Elaine should go into assisted living so she can live her best life possible, so should also caregivers live their best life possible. So she writes here, I wish my Alzheimer's would dissipate. I'd like to be the smart wife and mother I used to be. Now I have to waste so much time just trying to figure out what I should be doing without seeming as smart as I used to be. I need to rely on Marty for everything, and I'm very lucky he continues to keep me. Life gets more difficult every day. And so that's some of the things, and I just want to close with one of the better, more positive ones that she wrote. She writes, "Life is good, and I plan to have it continue that way until my children tell me it's time for a nursing home or something like that. This is realistic with what my Alzheimer's book says about my future. But till then, I will try my best to be normal, whatever that means, and keep my happy side of life always continuing. I'm lucky to have such a good family and many friends to help me get through all this. And so another great day to thank the Lord and to smile, smile, smile." And so to the caregivers, I would say, please understand that joining their world is something extremely important, that ignorance of the disease is one of the toughest challenges that we have to contend with, both through the medical profession as well as friends and neighbors as well. I take a look at this book and want to point out that any profits from the sale of this book go to support Alzheimer's support groups. I want to do as much as I can to help caregivers learn, cope, and survive. And we've been talking to nursing students, we've been talking to pharmacy students, we've been talking to caregiver groups, administrators of assisted living facilities, to make sure that people understand the importance of joining the world of the person who now is. Now, you should know that the book, people have picked up this book and they started to read it, and they couldn't put it down. And Bob, I'll tell you how that happened. What happened is a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, I'm running out of books. So I go to the printer and I said, "Hey, I need some more of these books as quickly as possible." And so he got these books done ahead of time. Now, you can see how shiny this is. You can see the glare. Well, there's a shellac and there's a varnish on here. Well, what happened is he didn't let that shellac, that varnish, dry. And so it became sticky. So people picked up the book and they started to read it and they wanted to set it down and they couldn't set it down. And so bragging, but that's just to let people know how things are going. But I want you also to know that because this is, well, we're from Wisconsin, I'm in Milwaukee, and we've got cold here sometimes. And I tried to figure out a way, and I'm afraid to tell this because other authors may, but I had one day in December where I went door to door selling these books. And so I would ring the doorbell and I just wore a t-shirt. So bitter cold. So I rang the doorbell and they came to the door and I said, I've got this book. And I was shivering. And do you want me to read you the book, or do you want to buy one? And they all decided to buy one. So I would hope that people might look at the book. I'm told that it is helpful to people and that it has made a difference in people's lives.
I will say, Marty, it is very easy to read. I read it in about 3 or 4 hours. It's easy to read and a very good book. But I wanted to ask you also, tell us about patience and persistence and prayer and the things that that you know so much about.
Well, prayer, persistence, and patience, and well, the best way I can explain, Bob, this woman had this parrot, and the only thing that this parrot knew how to say was, "Polly wants a party, Polly wants a party, Polly wants a party." So she is expecting out-of-town company college classmates from her doctorate thesis days and so forth. So what happens is she's going to know she's going to be embarrassed because that's all her parent knows. So she doesn't know what to do. So she decides to go see her priest. She says, "Father," she says, "you have to help me. I have this parrot. Polly wants a party. Polly wants a party. And my friends are coming. They're going to think I'm not a very good person because if that's all that Polly wants, what are they going to think of me? What should I do?" The priest says, "This is a miracle." He says, "I myself have 2 parrots. I have Peter Parrot and Paul Parrot. And all they do is pray all the time. They just pray all the time. I've had them for 7 years, and they pray every hour of the day, every day of the week, every week of the month, every month of the year for 7 years. What we should do is you have your parrot, Polly, come in with my parrot, Peter Parrot, and Paul Parrot, and my parrots will be a good influence on your parrot. So what happens is, yes, in fact, the lady gets her parrot, she brings it over to the home of the priest, and they take the parrot and open up the cage and they put Polly in, and sure enough, Polly wants a party, Polly wants a party. Well, Peter Parrot looked at Paul Parrot and said, our prayers have finally been answered. But it is, prayer, it has meant an awful lot. Patience has meant an awful lot. To learn about, redirection, to learn about joining their lives, and to be persistent in making sure that you keep your own well-being in the highest priority. So
When you say redirection, Marty, what do you mean? You said redirection.
well, Elaine wanted a glass of wine. It's 9:30 in the morning. 9:30 in the morning, and so I say, no, you can't have a glass of wine. It's 9:30 in the morning. Well, how do you tell someone no to a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning if they don't know it's morning, noon, or night anyway? And so then a simple matter through redirection is, well, do you want red wine or white wine? Do you want to drink it with your sisters, or should we invite the neighbors over? Do you want in a tall glass or in a smaller glass? And so maybe through that, then I am able to get her mind off of having a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning. But let's assume for a moment I can't, to think about it and say, well, what is wrong with a person having a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning? As I said, if they don't know it's morning, noon, or night anywhere. Anyway, and one of the reasons that I wrote the book too is because I have seen other caregivers. They're with their loved one, and the loved one says, I want another cookie, or I need another blanket. No, you can't have another cookie. You have 3 blankets on already. Why? Just understand that their world is that which they know, and that's their only world. And because of that, then to join them and give them a chance to try and redirect the way out, so he doesn't have to have that confrontation.
Okay. Did you have caregivers in the home?
Well, that's an interesting thing, and many of your viewers, your caregivers found this, but Elaine would not have another woman in this house. She absolutely refused, and I knew how important it was for me to get a break, and I tried to have people come in, but I even tried to tell Elaine, look, we have a brand new neighbor, and maybe you could take them for a walk and show them where the grocery store is, or the library, and so forth. She says, absolutely not. Let them find out, which is very uncharacteristic of Elaine. And so we caregivers have to turn into being, let me see, who's that famous detective? Sherlock Holmes. We have to decide we're going to be a Sherlock Holmes and try and figure out how we can deal with certain aspects of caregiving. And so because she would not allow anyone in the home, I finally hit on daycare. And that proved to be a good move, but she did not want to go to daycare. But I did know she was interested in furthering her education. And understanding that, I said, how about, Elaine, we take some college classes? That she liked. And so we got a spiral notebook, and we got a pen, a ballpoint pen. And every morning I would take her to college classes. Of course, the daycare people were advised on this in advance. And so when I would pick up Elaine and we would come home, we would go over her notes, and she would tell me then in turn what she learned that day. So we just simply have to understand that. And another example is to be a detective, and that is the loved one feeling useful. I read what Elaine was going through, what all people with Alzheimer's goes through as the disease progresses. But folding towels, well, I decided that folding towels might be a good thing. So she would spend time folding towels, very useful. We would, I'd take the towels into the other room, shake out and bring them back in again. She loved cooking. And I can't tell you how many stalks of celery that, how many stalks of celery that we in turn cut up. And it turned out to be a good thing.
I know many of our viewers talk about people who care for people with Alzheimer's. They tell little white lies, and they they allow these little white lies to go between them. Did you do any of that?
Absolutely. I don't call them white lies at all. I had a special term for that, which just escapes me for the moment, but certainly therapeutic fibbing. That's what I call
There you go. There you
therapeutic
go.
fibbing.
I've heard that term before.
Yeah, and boy, I tell you, therapeutic fibbing has saved me more than once or another, and it is so. Here's the key. The key is not the truth, or whatever we think truth should be or not. The key is joining the world of the person who now is. And again, if it's a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning, that's all right. If it's going to a college class at the same time going to daycare,
Right.
all down through the line, but therapeutic fibbing is a must, absolutely. So,
Right.
what I want you to know is that I have been visiting Elaine now because of COVID, an hour a day, twice a week. And so that has been a challenge, but I'm able to sing, I'm able to hold her hand. And as I said, she doesn't know who I am, but as I said before, I wanted to emphasize so strongly that it is not necessary for our loved ones to know who we are in order for our hearts to touch.
Yeah. Yeah. How did your friends react when Elaine started losing her memory?
Well, a lot. When your last presenter sort of hit it on the head, talking about disappointment in friends and relatives, that those you thought that would be there were not, and those that you never thought would be there were. And that some of them avoided it, and some of them made excuses as to why they should not, we should not be getting together. And again, it was really, I was a lot at fault because I didn't share with them. When I had my friends, relatives, some of them read the manuscript of my book, they said, we had no idea, absolutely no idea what it's like to be a caregiver. And so what the point is to understand that there are going to be what we would feel disappointments, but I would not call it a forsaken friendship. I would call it simply ignorance of the disease that causes this kind of separation to take place.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that's true for a lot of caregivers, not just Alzheimer's. Losing friends is a very common problem. A very common problem. Well, let's. Do you want to open it up for some questions now, Marty?
I think if there are questions, I would be more than pleased to try and respond. Thank you.
Okay. Jerry, do you have any questions on the question line?
Yep, Anita has her hand up. So, Anita, you can unmute your...
Hi there.
Hi, Anita.
I'm a former caregiver, just so you know. Not everybody knows that, but I was caregiver for 26 years.
Oh my.
And what struck me about your story was, well, several things, but the one thing you just most recently spoke of is losing friends. And I felt that same feeling that I was losing friends because of my husband's condition. But it turns out that I decided that they were not really friends to begin with, because if they were really friends, they would not have disappeared in the most horrible and darkest part of our lives. Um, so I was able to reconcile that in my head and get past that. I don't know if that will help others feel that way as well, but I also just on the other side of the coin, I also found that there were people in my life that I knew and I'd been friendly with, but I didn't realize how closely they felt towards me and my husband when my husband's situation came about. And so I actually discovered new friends. Not just that they were not just that I did not know them before, but I just did not know how precious they were to me at the time. And they became closer, and I can see now, looking back, how easy that is to see now. But of course at the time it was very devastating. So I can appreciate what you're saying about, and what has been said all day long about how others react towards our circumstances. Sometimes they just don't know what to say or how to act because it's not part of the way society is learning how to deal with it. Maybe
Yeah.
in years in the future, maybe that'll be part of our entire what's the word I'm looking for, guys? Our
Our culture.
Culture.
our
Our
culture. Thank
culture.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because like for example in Japan, I mean or in the Asian countries, I don't know if it's just Japan, but they have, 3 generations living in one house. So they all know what it's like to live with someone who's older and not as well as someone who is younger.
Mhm.
So anyway, I just wanted to put my 2 cents in because friendship is a really important thing to me. And by the way, as we were mentioning before you came on, Martin, that a lot of us have met each other many, many years ago, and we have remained friends all these years. So the closest friends that I've had in regards to knowing who I am and what I'm about have all been spouses. And it's a wonderful relationship that I have with you guys. So just wanted to mention that. So
Thank you, Anita. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Well,
Anita.
and Anita, that's what emphasizes the quality of the organization, of the leadership,
exactly.
the participation of the people who are making a difference. But let me mention a few things. First of all, you're right on. One point I wanted to mention, and I have 4 children, and I mentioned I wrote my book. I have found Elaine's observations, but never did I ask my children. And finally, I added an addendum, epilogue to the book, which includes my children's reactions. And what I am finding out is everyone handles this disease a different way. And so of my 4 children, my 2 daughters will come and visit whenever they can, although one on the East, one on the West Coast. I have a son who wants to remember mom as she was and is very, very, very reluctant, although he will do anything for me that I ask. And then another son who regularly visits his mom. And so I had to be very, very careful not to be too judgmental on how people reacted. Like Elaine has 2 sisters and a brother and so forth, and they reacted in a different manner. And so, but Anita, what is so important and what you pointed out is, in essence, when our loved one is leaving us through this dementia, that leaves a gigantic hole. Happens is maybe by the grace of God, we meet other people who help fill that depth of loss. And that has happened in my life. MaryAnn Clairday, who is now working with me to help with management of my time and the book, has become a very good friend. She was a caregiver for her mom for 12 years. Tom Lavicek, who used to be head of the Alzheimer's Association, and then other caregivers along the way. And gosh, how much we need each other, we fellow caregivers, so that we can keep each other in sanity and with hope. But there's an old saying, rather than worrying about the storm to pass, to try and learn how to dance in the rain.
That's right.
Caregivers.
I like that.
I never heard the whole phrase though. I've only heard, about, I've heard that in a brief excerpt. I haven't heard that whole saying. That's really true. Learn how to dance in the rain. That's great.
So Sharon has a question. So I unmuted Sharon's line.
Hi, everyone. I just want to piggyback off of Anita when she mentioned the friends. We've been in our city for over and had a business in our community for over 25 years. And my husband was the one who's employed people and did a lot of things for the community. He called all the children pretty much in our area, his community, nieces and nephews. Okay, when he took ill, in the beginning, we had people come around and, if you needed anything, they offered their assistance and help and things like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm at 5 years now. This year, last year, for the last 3 years, no one. And so when you speak of friends and when I run into them and they send word through other relatives that I just don't want to see him that way. Right. Everybody say the same thing. Everybody who don't even know each other, East Coast, West Coast, I just can't see him that way. Okay, so I said, okay, I understood. In the beginning, I did. Okay, well, then I started to think, how would you want to see him? In a casket? That's when everybody going to flood the place to see him at that point. He can still hear right now. No, he can't talk. He cannot communicate. He laughs still. But he can hear. People say, you know what? I just need somebody who has a listening ear. Okay, well, he can listen, but he can't respond. So just talk to him. Don't look for a response back. So how do you respond to people when they say, I just don't want to see him that way? It's been 5 years now.
I'd say let it go. I would like to have that attention. I would like to have them visit and so forth. But if they don't want to do it, I don't have any other option. In my experience has been letting go was more important than thinking about how I might unite them with Elaine. And that's another thing I learned, and that is letting go. Like I said, letting go of the person who once was, but also letting go of people who are ignorant of the disease. Letting go of people that we would, and so if they don't want to visit, that's going to be up to them. And I don't think there's anything you can do about it. Now, I don't know if anyone else has any better answer than that, but I found out no matter how much I would try, and of course you don't want them. Here's the thing too, which it can be related to friends. I once was visiting with my counselor, and I just don't feel like seeing Elaine. I feel so guilty, and she said, "Don't." And I said, well, why? What do you mean, don't? Well, she said, when you visit Elaine, she can feel and sense what your emotions are. And if you go see her and you're worried and you're upset, she's going to pick that up, and you're having the opposite impact on her life than what you wanted to have when you went to see her. And so if there was someone who just does not want to see Elaine in that situation, whether it's one of her sisters or her brother or so forth, to say, you go see her, they walk in and automatically I know that a person can pick that up. And so, Sharon, the more I think about it, I think we just got to let those people go and go on without them. And hopefully someday they'll come to an understanding.
Okay, that's pretty much what I did. I just wanted to hear another perspective.
Good luck, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yes.
All right. Patti is next.
Thank you, Governor, for your insight and a lot of wisdom in this, and I've really appreciated your words. My husband's had a very severe dementia for more than 12 years now. Currently, we live with our oldest daughter, who happens to have our youngest grandchildren. We have 4 daughters and 6 grandchildren. We live with the one daughter. So I heard you talk a little bit about your family, and each of our daughters is reacting very differently to losing their father in this way that we call it the long goodbye, where he's just disappearing on us. The two youngest grandchildren, they're now 7 and 10. We've been here a couple years, but they've never really known the grandfather. Yeah, he's been a different person for several years now. And the youngest granddaughter in particular will say, I don't really know my grandfather. I know he was a nice man. But he's not always nice anymore. The dementia has done some things that have brought a whole dark side of the person. So I'm just curious how your family is handling the grandchildren and the daughter and son interaction with Elaine and how all that goes for you.
Well, first of all, as I mentioned, first of all, Patti, my heart goes out to you, and we all realize how much we would want our grandchildren to have a fond memory and a good relationship with the grandparents. You have 12 years, I think you said. I'm on 16 years. And the only reason I mentioned a longer period of time is our loved ones are on this journey. And I read some of Elaine's notes from the very beginning, more towards when she was getting to the point where she didn't know who she was anymore. So there were different stages. In the early stages, the grandchildren were so loving and so caring and helpful. But as Elaine began to develop, move into being another person, they sort of too again wanted to remember her as she was, the caring grandmother, and showing them how to sew, taking them to the different plays and shopping and so forth, that they wanted to remember her as she was. And I guess I'm all right with that. Again, because I said my two Elaines, and the first Elaine was this wonderful woman, and the second Elaine is someone who's quite different, and I have to let go of that first Elaine. And so I get to the point where you and I can try and have our grandchildren understand that, but unless they have that kind of curiosity or desire to get closer, I would never force my grandchildren to want to pay attention or want to go see grandmother Elaine. Some do voluntarily and some don't, but that's up to them. And
yeah, it really is.
yeah.
Our older teenage grandchildren, when we lived near them until 2 years ago, they have really some wonderful memories of baseball games and other things with Grandpa, and they share that with these two young ones from time to time when we get to talk on FaceTime, which is, I feel like they can help keep the memory of that grandfather alive, because we live with these two young ones, and some days are just very, very hard.
Yeah. Well, a tribute to your daughter and family for
Yes.
gosh, and here's another thing we talk about, rather than worrying about the storm, the past, the dance in the rain, just to look at good things. The fact that you've got these two older grandchildren, having those fond memories and imparting those good memories to the other grandchildren, that's something to really feel good about. The fact that you've got a daughter who's, and so, life is miserable and our loved one is losing who they are, and it's COVID and so forth, but by God, we've got some just wonderful things going.
Some great memories.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time with us today.
Well, Patti, thank you very much. I wish you well.
And you as well. Thank you.
Hi, we have Edna.
Hi, Governor. Thank you for giving your time to stay with us today and share your experiences. I do appreciate your comment about the key is joining the world of who they are now. My husband is in the last stages of Parkinson's disease and has the dementia part of it. So I am also a nurse, and Nursing 101 says that when they're confused, we orient them. So if they say it's nighttime, we say it's daytime. So I have to overcome that, what I have learned and what I was trained, because of my experience that does not work with this kind of patients. So I don't do that anymore. And when people ask me, so how is he doing? How is your husband doing? And I would usually say, well, he is happy in his world. And I usually join him there wherever that takes us. So help me bring this home to me, because in people with dementia, they lose short-term memory. And so they don't remember. He doesn't remember my name sometimes. And when he talks of a wife, sometimes he would refer to the ex-wife as the wife and not even me. And, I'm the one that's there. I also ache for my daughters because a lot of times he doesn't remember their names, maybe don't remember them or recognize them. So I'm sure that this has happened to you too. What do you do to help you deal with this and just help with this daily, brokenness in you and the ache to get through this?
Edna, God love you. I told the story about the hippopotamus and the butterfly that fell in love, and the wise owl said to the hippopotamus, "Change yourself into a butterfly." And we went back, "How do I do that?" And he said, "Well, that's policy, Um, my experience has been that I had to let go of the first Elaine. I had to let go of this person who once was. And therefore, I have a better ability to embrace the person who now is. And so when you are called a different name, if there's another situation, that is not your first, that's not, it's a different person that's talking. And sometimes a person can become abusive and use foul language and just be hell on wheels. Well, as hard as that is to experience, the easier aspect is to understand that this is a different person. And so I think I mentioned earlier that when Elaine and I were having lunch and she began to cry and she told me that she loved me more than her husband. The point there is that she doesn't have to know who I am in order for our hearts to touch. And it's a horrible disease. It's so painful, but I have to get to the point where the way we get through it, surviving and coping, is to know we've got to join their world, because you can't fight it. There's no way you're going to switch it around. And I wish I could be of greater help to you other than to just tell you what my experiences have been.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have MaryAnn. Okay, MaryAnn, you may now speak.
Hi there. Yes. So I work with Marty, and I was thinking you guys have such great questions. And just two things that I'd like to add. As Marty shared, I cared for my mom for many, many years, and now I'm actually helping a brother who has dementia issues. But Edna, I would start out with taking a Band-Aid out and visualizing that Band-Aid on your husband's brain. And why I want you to do that is because it means his brain is broken. And just as you know, as a nurse, and maybe you can share this with your daughters, because I know it's heartbreaking when he can't remember them, and same for you, because he is losing probably his memory on a timeline. It's going to get more, and there's going to be more memory loss as time goes on. But if you put this Band-Aid, visualize this Band-Aid on his head, his brain is broken. And just as you wouldn't ask a person with a broken leg to jump rope, we don't ask a person with a broken brain to remember. And so maybe if you share that story with them and you just say his brain is broken, he can't remember, but he does remember a smile, and he remembers love and caring and kindness, just like Marty said, your hearts can connect without remembering. And I think so many times we get hung up on that. So I just wanted to add that's something that Marty's counselor helped me with when I was with people who were forgetting and trying to help them. And then just one more addition to Patti. When my mother started losing her memory, I asked her a lot of questions and documented her story. And what I'm seeing now, 20 years later, is that my nieces and nephews and great nieces and nephews are reading that story and remembering what an incredible woman she was. And so if you have some time, maybe you can do some video recording or write it in a journal. And maybe you've already done that, Patti, but I think your grandchildren, maybe not in the next couple years or in 5-10 years, but someday they're going to read that and they're going to know the love that you and your husband have for each other and what a great man he is. That's all. Thanks so much.
Thank you, MaryAnn.
Okay, thank you, MaryAnn. We have another question from Mindy Farber. Hopefully I said that right. Okay, Mindy, you can unmute your
Yes.
line.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I want to bring up two different issues with Marty. And Marty, I really greatly enjoyed what you had to say. I too went through caregiving for, in my case, a husband with early onset Alzheimer's that became very grave very quickly. Two issues that I want to bring up that you didn't bring up, and I started thinking about it maybe because I'm slightly generationally different. I'm the baby boomer generation, and this happened to me so young. And I just actually wrote an article for Mainstay about some of this. But because, and I mentioned my being a baby boomer in this respect, my husband and I were both equally matched up in making decisions to both be in the same profession. We both happened to become attorneys. And it became apparent, and it was brought up to me, I live in the state of Maryland, that if I didn't take some economic action, once I put him into assisted living, if we didn't have enough assets from his money to pay for him, the government was going to come after my assets. Because as everybody knows, the government, the health system is incredibly broken in helping people with Alzheimer's. I hope to be a very candid person. In my community, it costs $8,000 and up a month to cover him in adequate assisted living. And in order to, it looked like there was some possibility, and I hear you talk about 12 years and 16 years of being in assisted living or being in this kind of care, that at some point, as well as he did, there was going to be a possibility his assets were going to diminish. And I had to actually see an elder care attorney about what was going to happen to me, because I could not be in a position of having worked so hard and seeing my assets deplete. And the answer I got was, no matter what happens, the government will definitely take away your assets before they'll give him anything. So I actually had to go through 2 years ago what's called an economic divorce in Maryland. And I actually had a divorce. And the minute I got the divorce, I was the first person in this county to then ask for custody, to have custody over the person I was divorcing. And I find it astounding, actually, that one of the things I find very few people talk about is this issue of affordability and why it's on the backs of the caregiver to put out that kind of obscene money a month to have someone properly cared for. We were lucky that we just did very well. But I hear people, and I've heard people, talk on this today, where clearly it may not be the same, and I'm not judging it at all. But we ultimately wound up finding a good facility in another part of the state that brought us down to $5,500 a month. But this is something I'd like, Marty, if you could, to remark on the incredible cost of this and the fact that I was driven ultimately to get a divorce.
Mindy, you are laying out one of the biggest challenges that caregivers have to face in addition to the losing of their loved ones. And Senator Baldwin from Wisconsin is working in the United States Senate to have a better focus on this on behalf of caregivers. But it is such a horrible thing where you actually have to get a divorce in order to be able to survive. And so, Mindy, maybe, we've got to get the Association of Elder Care Attorneys and Mindy, I don't have an immediate answer for you. I would like to tell you that there's all kinds of bills pending in Congress and so forth. But I'm not aware of some
No.
financial bills.
Mindy, I just want to say all the states are different. Like, for example, in your situation in New York, there's something called spousal refusal, where the spouse gets to a certain point and refuses to pay anymore, and they don't actually have to divorce. In some states, they have to divorce and then they apply for guardianship or do whatever, to continue to supervise care. It varies a lot state by state, Mindy. So we've had speakers over the years on Medicaid and these financial issues. So stick with us, and we'll have a speaker on financial issues someday soon. Okay, Jerry, do you have other questions?
We don't have anybody else.
I know
other than what some people are talking about on the chat.
Rona was trying to get through. Can you unmute Rona?
Well said. I'm not sure that anybody has an answer.
No, but
I don't think Rona's on anymore.
Yeah.
But you just.
Oh, wait a minute. She's under R. Rona has allowed to talk. Okay, Rona. You can unmute and speak.
Lived in Connecticut, and when he went into a facility, which was only 5 months before he died, after consulting an elder attorney, moved him into a facility in New York, and I moved to New York because New York is a spousal refusal state. If we had stayed in Connecticut, I would have lost everything that I had ever made paying for Doug's care. So it's different state by state, but also listening before to the conversation, my dad had Alzheimer's. And he was a salesman and his life was his interaction with people. So he always smiled when you walked into the room, but we had no clue if he knew anyone, and we had to change the lock on the door so he couldn't wander out, by himself. But I think that being able to share all of this with all the other well spouses, in many cases, we sometimes get these thoughts in our head and go, oh my God, it's awful. It's not awful, it's normal. It's just we're in very difficult situations. And what kept, going through my head is with the different conversations is the only one whose behavior we can control is our own behavior. We can't change how anybody else acts, but you do find out in these situations who your true friends are, those who hang in there and stay and support you in the most difficult of times.
Thank
Amen
you,
to
Verna.
that.
Thank you, Verna. And your new friends, your new well spouse friends are some of the greatest, right?
Well, spouse friends are unbelievable. Unbelievable. What we share.
Right.
And our
Right.
friendships last. I mean, I'm widowed 20 years and I'm still friendly with you guys. It's like,
Yeah.
How amazing is that?
Yeah.
Sorry?
I said, how amazing is that?
Yeah.
That we're friendly with each other all these years.
Absolutely.
Anyone else, Jerry? You got anyone else on the line with questions?
I have nobody else. And Laurel Whitman posted the Well Spouse Association is a social action committee that helps connect members to legislation and legislators to help bring light to the financial issues. Voting matters. Yep. And then Suzanne wrote, you find out who loves you and falls by the wayside, and you might be surprised at who does what. Yeah, I can relate to that. Most of my friends are, well, long gone. Most of my friends now are caregivers and well spouses, like Bob and Rona and Anita and Barry and some of the other people. And so when we have respite weekends, I actually look forward to getting together with my friends.
Yeah. What I think is really important too, I remember going to a workshop, it was probably more than 10 years ago, and it was on elder, you know, it was about elder lawyers and other stuff. And it amazed me with the amount of well spouses who had never had conversations with their spouses who were cognitively okay about what they wanted to do. Did they want to go on IVs? Did they want life-saving things? Did they not? Did they want a do not resuscitate? None of this had been, you know, discussed, and it was very important that this workshop brought this to light and kind of turned on a light bulb. And people went, yeah, really, I really should do this. I mean, I knew what Doug wanted, and I happened to agree what he wanted with what he wanted, but it wouldn't have mattered. I would have, you know, carried through on what he wanted. And I think those are very important discussions. They're difficult, but they're very important to have. And a conference brought that to, you know, the forefront, which is very important.
All right, so we've got a note from Carol. Carol wants to find out more about the Well Spouse Association Social Action Committee.
Well, the Social Action Committee publishes articles in our newsletter Mainstay, and I think the best way to get started would be to make a $30 donation to Well Spouse and get on join, go to the website, click on join, make the donation, and start getting your newsletter. And then you could follow the actions of the Well Spouse Social Action Committee. With regard to finding out more about what goes on in New York State, I would go on the website, and after you've joined, you could join some of the meetings of the groups in New York. I know one of the most active groups in New York is on the east side of Manhattan. So I hope I've helped you with that. Jerry, do you have anyone else?
We do not, but Sharon wrote, well, I would like to meet some people here. I would say the best way to meet some people, Sharon, would be to keep an eye out on the website for a respite or a national conference, which, you know, obviously we'll hopefully going to have one next year, depending on what COVID has to say about it. This one was actually scheduled for June in Washington, D.C., and then rescheduled to this weekend on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, only because, you know, that's where I live and, well, had a chance to do something here. But they were ultimately both canceled. I don't know if you care to share with us where or what state you're from. Maybe we can see if we can't find a local group for you to join to begin with. If not,
well, you could go onto the website. I think that's the key, and find a group. Find a group near you, and if you don't find a group near you, we're going to get some word out on some of these Zoom meeting groups where you can join in.
Yeah, and the other thing is if you cannot find one, find the Massachusetts group. Look for my email address. This is Jerry Bishop, not Al Cozen. I have a Zoom meeting every, actually two Zoom meetings a month. They're the second Tuesday and the last Tuesday of the month at 8 o'clock at night. Feel free to send me an email, and I will add you to the list. Actually, if you're interested, our next meeting is Tuesday. So I'll be sending that notice out. It'll be a Zoom meeting similar to this, only we won't be recording it, and everyone will be able to see everybody else and talk at the same time. And the other thing that I would suggest is, like I said, keep an eye on the Well Spouse website for our respite weekends. Feel free to join us. They are a lot of fun. Anyone who's been on one will attest to that.
Absolutely.
You know, you can do anything from sleep the entire weekend to stay up the entire weekend, and you know, anything and everything in between.
Got to say party and party, like
And
the
play.
party.
And party and laugh and joke and
laugh and laugh and laugh. Yep.
Mhm.
Bob and I were in one in Wildwood, New Jersey last month, and we played a card game, or we played a game both nights. You know, and we were able to find two restaurants that had, you know, outdoor dining, and you know, some people walked along the beach. Some people went and did some shopping at the local. They call it the mall, but it's actually, you know, 2 streets that have little stores on both sides, and we went to see some of the local sites on the Saturday, and you know, there were times where Bob and I were just sitting on a bench. So, you know, like I said, you can do anything from sleep the entire weekend to be up the entire weekend.
All right, well, I think we've exhausted most of the questions. I want to thank Marty. Marty, thank you very much for being with us. And I'm going to show your book again. And if you want to buy the book, it's my2elaines.com. my2elaines.com. Very easy to read and very insightful. And it's, if you don't remember that, you can go to our website and there's an ad on the website for Marty's book. Okay. Well, it's been a long day and we've had a lot of good speakers and a lot of good Q&A, and I really appreciated this. And we're going to be talking about ways to continue to get the word out about Well Spouse. And I think some very good suggestions were made about the Zoom meetings. Since we're meeting on Zoom, we have the opportunity to meet from any geographical area. So I think that would be good too. So we're going to work on that. I want to thank everyone for participating. We've had different numbers during the day, but I think our high point was just under 50 members on the call during the day. So I want to thank everyone very much and say good night. Be sure to support wellspouse.org, and thank you again. Bye-bye.
Anita has one.
Anita?
I just wanted to say you guys are great. You know, I know you guys personally, and I think you dedicated, you, Rona, Bob, have dedicated, Jerry, meaning you, have dedicated a lot of time and effort into this organization. And, you know, we are in a new world here, and maybe we can consider doing an in-person conference next year, but included on Zoom somehow, in order to include people who cannot leave home and people who cannot make it on the trip.
Yeah. Well, we're learning more and more about technology all the time, and
Of course.
yeah, and how to use it better.
Right.
I mean, when COVID first hit, we distributed telephone numbers and conference call numbers.
Right.
It started with conference calls, and then people started picking up Zoom, and we started using Zoom. So we're getting better. We're getting better all the time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm mentioning it because it was mentioned in the chat somewhere that somebody said that they can't come to the conference. So it turned on a light bulb in my head that maybe we can do it side by side. We can have in person and then also give the Zoom part of it available, make the Zoom part of it available to those who can't make the trip.
Sure. Sure.
If COVID is, you know, lifted at that point, if we can meet in person. But obviously, if we can't, we'll still keep this up. I think this is great. And I think I would like to say also that everybody who has been online should at least donate, you know, a minimum of $10, $20, $30, just because we are an organization who are surviving, you know, week to week, and hoping that people will know who we are and be willing to donate. And I think it's important that we support Well Spouse, even if, as in my case and Bob's case and Rona's and many others that were formers. I think it's very important to continue to support, if nothing else, just because we had a few minutes of light bulb moments, Jerry, today.
Thank you, Anita. Thank
you. Just my little pitch. I think everyone should chip in something, and God bless everybody. I know how tough this life is, and it's not a whole lot better with the COVID, certainly. But I wish everybody well. All of you.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Anita,
guys.
and you as well.
Good to see
Everybody
you.
stay safe.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Stay safe. Thank you, Marty. Thank
Yeah,
you
thank
all
you.
very much for being
Very
here.
great job.
Thank
Bob, we'll
you.
talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay.